Thank you for waiting. At this time, we're going to have customers seated in premium economy. Upper class is flying for gold on the left-hand side of gates A11. Once again, premium economy, upper class is flying for gold on the left-hand side of gate.
It was only last June when her old man ran away. She couldn't stop crying because she knew he was gone to stay. 10:35 on a lonely Friday night.
Okay.
In the entire span of my school career, from the time I started kindergarten in Juliet, Georgia in 1975 to the time I graduated high school in Wauchula, Florida in 1988, I think I'm safe in saying that there are only 3 albums released in that time span that every one of my classmates owned. Only 3 albums that were universally loved by everyone in my class. The first one came out when I was in 6th grade while attending Franklin Road Academy in Nashville, Tennessee. And that album was Journey's Escape, or more accurately, E5C4P3. You sank my battleship. Quiet, you. Yeah, even in 6th grade, Don't Stop Believin' was an anthem. The next year, my 7th grade year, I spent half of that year in Nashville, and then the family moved to Wauchula. And it was that year that Michael Jackson's Thriller came out. And I don't know if it's possible to convey just how much of a phenomenon that album was when it came out. I mean, it's 1982, and we have the very beginnings of some of the kinds of things that would eventually come to supplant music culturally. There were video games, but not like today. It was arcades and the Atari 2600, or the Intellivision. There was cable, but unless you could afford to pay what was about $250 a month, the only things you were watching were your basic dozen local channels plus a handful of first-generation cable channels like USA, MTV, Home Shopping Network. And there were a bunch of things that technically were around in 1982, but most people didn't have access to, like the internet, VCRs, mobile phones. The point being is that when Michael Jackson's Thriller came out in 1982, it was the biggest selling album of all time. And after 1982, we would never have the kind of unified cultural force behind music for that to happen ever again. There won't ever be another Thriller. But in 1984, we got pretty close, I think. I mean, look, when I was 14, Prince released the movie Purple Rain and its accompanying soundtrack. It wasn't nearly the universal cultural phenomenon that Thriller was, but it sure as heck got the attention of everyone in my class. Look, being 14 in 1984, before any of us had, say, internet access, I think it's safe to say that nearly everyone in Hardy High School's class of 1988 learned something they hadn't known before thanks to Purple Rain, especially from Darling Nikki. But it wasn't just the risque themes on that album that attracted most of us, though that certainly helped. There was also a collection of really amazing sounding songs. It had a quality of internal consistency, yet entirely unique style. The sounds of the drums, the guitar, the ethereal string and synthesizer runs that seemed to evoke something otherworldly. It's a great album. After Purple Rain, though, my knowledge of Prince is pretty much limited to what's made it into popular culture. Kiss, Raspberry Beret, Bat Dance. At the time, I guess I felt about Prince the way I felt about many pop or R&B stars at the time. Some I liked, some I didn't. But even the ones that seemed pretty cool from the radio, I never pursued any further. But over the years, it has become obvious that for a good portion of folks out there, Prince was becoming increasingly important, iconic even. Through all the changing of his name to an unpronounceable symbol, the religious stuff, the social oddities, Prince was still seen as a figure that transcended the music he made. Similar in many ways to David Bowie. When Prince died in 2016, I was on tour with Butch Trucks and the Freight Train Band. We had a song in our set list, an original composed by the keyboardist Bruce Katz. We referred to that tune as the hippie tune, And the first time we played it after Prince's death, the vamp in it is very similar to 1999. So I started my solo by quoting the melody to 1999. And I think that actually might be the single biggest reaction I've ever received to a solo I've played. So yes, I acknowledge Prince was important. So it's time for me to take the next step and learn the music. Starting with the album I think I know the least about.
She's standing by the bar. She was looking alright.
I just finished listening to the album. I surprisingly have never really grown up with a lot of exposure to Prince. I've heard maybe 2 songs by him, Purple Rain and Darling Nikki. And when I first jumped into this album, the opening track, Sign of the Times, it sounded exactly what I thought a Prince song would sound like. But then as the album kind of progressed and it got more of a groove and a funk, I was kind of taken aback. You know, it sounded like a Prince album, but in the best way possible, I think. I was talking to my dad a little bit before me filming this about how Play in the Sunshine to me kind of sounds like Footloose. And he said, yeah, but around 3.5 minutes in, it sounds like straight up Zappa, which I can agree with, you know? So that's something I really appreciate.
The drum sounds! Oh my goodness. Look, I recognize and I respect the fact that Prince played pretty much every note on this entire album. I also give him full credit for taking chances and finding sounds that would stand out, that would potentially be game-changing. But listening to it from the perspective of 34 years later, it sounds so dated. But hey, okay, you have to take the chance, right? Sometimes it works out, and when it does, you've changed the game forever. Sometimes, though, and even though the drum sounds are present on the entire album, they only stood out for me on a couple of tunes, like on the title track, on the Ballad of Dorothy Parker, and Hot Thing. It's the overly clicky square wave drum kick thing, and the snare with the gated reverb and absolutely no dynamics. Another thing I noticed is that this album has a number of tunes that are basically just a simple groove over either a single chord or a simple bass line that persists through the entire song. And any movement, any dynamics, any motion to the song comes from the note choices in the melody or harmonies and nothing else. But, you know, be fair, that can be fantastic when it's done right. I mean, that's James Brown's formula. A lot of talking heads, too. But that's not the whole album. There are tracks where the chords and melody are as sophisticated as anything from the Great American Songbook. I mean, take the chorus to I Could Never Take the Place of Your Man, for example. And Play in the Sunshine. I started out thinking it was going to be another simple kind of 2-chord affair, like Let's Go Crazy from Purple Rain, and then just before the 4-minute mark, it suddenly becomes a Zappa piece, with some improvisation on marimba, followed by a very Zappa-like transitional phrase. So here is not your typical way to get from the key of A to the key of E flat. And then an absolutely shredded wah guitar solo. Nice. Overall, these first couple of listens are fun. There's no doubt the attitude to content ratio is greater than 1, but in this case it's because there's so much attitude and not because there's no content to speak of. Oh, and there's also a reference to Joni Mitchell's Help Me in the Ballad of Dorothy Parker. Yeah, so far so good.
Know if I thought I was qualified.
Yeah, a lot better than I expected it was going to be. A lot more funk. I would definitely listen to it again.
I don't know where I first heard this analogy, but I like it. It challenges me. If you want to know the difference attitude can make in how you're perceived, just compare Mick Jagger to Don Knotts. It's a line of thought and a line of personal improvement I've actually resisted for a long time. My comfort zone. My comfort zone is to be honest and let the music speak for itself, if the notes you compose can be heard and appreciated regardless of the context or the stylistic trappings, that always feels more satisfying to me. And while I think it's unlikely that I'm going to change this aspect of the way that I view music anytime soon, I do have to acknowledge the fact that I've begun to recognize that it's not as high-minded an ideal as I might have let myself believe. I think there might be some rationalization stemming from personal insecurity at the root of that viewpoint. Let me see if I can explain. And the things that appeal to me as a musician, my comfort zone, understanding the instrument, executing well, mastering difficult technical passages, understanding a theoretical context, even a cultural or artistic context for music. These are skills I can improve by myself with research, practice, self-discipline. But this is not all that there is to music, and it's taking me a long time to come to terms with that. There are a lot of skills that go into learning and playing music. You need one set of skills to learn and practice. Skills that include ear training, charting, theory, technique, practice diligence. You need another set of skills to rehearse music with the group. You need to learn how to communicate. You need to learn focus, trust, and delegation. But here's the thing. You need yet another set of skills to communicate with an audience, either live or on record. To truly connect with an audience, either live or in the studio, you need another set of skills. You need to learn to get over yourself. You need to learn total commitment, self-confidence. In short, you have to have at least some kind of attitude when it comes to the music. The people listening need to be able to feel your belief in what you're playing. Rarely can an artist get away with being a complete introvert and still connect with an audience. It can happen, but it's not common. And that's what I'm hearing on Sign of the Times, is Prince's total commitment to his work. A vision that he has had of the way he wanted this to sound, and him selling the hell out of it. That's why Prince is an icon. His music is good. Not technically great for the most part, but certainly above average, especially as a guitarist. But the combination of his music's uniqueness and Prince's own ability to exude attitude and confidence is what allows him to connect so strenuously with so many people. His total commitment. It's a lesson I'm continuing to learn. It's a hard one for me, but I'm definitely working on it.
Yeah. Thanks for the recommendation.
After the baby and another one